Welcome to another episode of FTK Over the Air. And this week we have a really cool guest and a really cool topic. We are going to be talking about the dark web, specifically the distribution of drugs, how things have changed in that quote unquote market, and just how we can investigate those types of crimes a little bit better, collaborate a little bit better. So first off, I want to introduce our guest, Kevin Hendricks, who's the founder of a project called Ubivis. It's a website, it's a service, and we're going to talk about what that is in the podcast in depth, but really quick, it's a way for investigators as well as civilians, regular people, to report activity related to drug overdoses, related to dark web vendors, that sort of thing, so that we can increase our awareness and our investigative capacity and abilities into that area. We'll talk about it as we go through, what the problem is and how we can help to slow it down, how we can help people, etc. One of my favorite lines from this podcast is "Dead people do not leave bad reviews." So we address the issues with the review system on drug trafficking in dark web. So Kevin Hendricks, like I said, is the founder of this project. It's his passion to work in this space, to help in this space. So he's been serving in law enforcement since 2007. If you're watching on video, you can see his bio here on the website. Frontline of combating cybercrime since 2014, being a member of the Internet Crimes Against Children FBI Task Force from 2014 to 2018, and a member of a DEA Cybercrimes Task Force from 2018 to 2021. So he has a lot of law enforcement experience and a lot of experience in this space of the dark web, of drug trafficking, of general law enforcement. And so it's a really good episode. Follow us after the jump, and we'll get in with Kevin Hendricks. Thanks again. All right, and we're back now, and Kevin Hendricks has joined us. Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Justin. How are you, sir?
Good. I know we're on opposite sides of the country, but how is the weather in the east side of the United States doing today for you?
Yeah, a very comfortable 19 degrees with a negative wind chill outside. So yeah,
we've heard those rumors. Yep.
Yes, makes living here so much better during these months.
Absolutely.
That's why I moved to Florida. Specifically.
Yeah.
Trade the cold for the hurricanes.
Yeah. Good for the bad. We get hurricanes up here too, so
but hurricanes, you can have a party. That's still fun.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have hurricanes, so I'll pass. But so Kevin, you and I sat down last week or something like that, and we chatted a little bit. And one of the things that came out of that discussion, which I think will play into some of the projects that you're working, some of the work history that you've done, is the dark web. And I think one of the things we should start with is basically just a general chat of what the dark web is, what it isn't, that general thing. So what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. So I'll be the first one to admit, I think from a law enforcement perspective, we have a naive understanding of what the dark web is. Everything that we associate from a law enforcement standpoint with the dark web is negative, all these negative connotations. I challenge you to find another representation of the dark web user that's not the guy in the hood in some room running a terminal screen, stealing your credit cards. Now, albeit that is a big factor of what goes on in the dark web, I'm one of the people who understand that the dark web, and I shouldn't say I'm one of the few people, but I'm one of the people in the law enforcement realm that understand that, no, the dark web is not only for bad things. And the dark web is much more expansive than we in law enforcement really give it credit for. for most of us, when we have a perception of the dark web, we're thinking of the Onion Router, we're thinking of Tor, we're thinking of Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road. And I feel law enforcement's understanding of the dark web kind of stunted right around then. When I first started investigating dark web cases, this was late 2014, early 2015, when there were pretty well-known operations that were going on from a federal standpoint on the dark web. Specifically at the time, my purview was child exploitation. So I was part of cases that made headlines with Vice News, with more of a negative spin about it. The capabilities of what the federal partners had at the time regarding dark web investigations. Were there tools out there that were decrypting the dark web, X, Y, and Z? But when I got into it back then, I just was so interested in it. I started to use I2P as well, because during an interview with somebody, they explained, hey, I not only use the Tor browser, but I also use I2P. And I was like, what is I2P? And that was 2015. So since then, I've really done a lot of my own learning. I've done a lot of training, opted for training put on both the private and the public sector side to really get an understanding of the dark web. And I'll be the first person to tell you, the dark web is not all bad. There's certain countries around the world where they need the dark web to communicate. Right now, if you look what's going on in terms of global affairs, you see on the Tor browser, the most people really using it by country are Iran and Russia. That's what it was as of the last month. So you have these people that are just trying to convey some information maybe to the outside world, or to view some sort of news that the government might not like. Like, for example, we know in Russia, they can't say it's a war, it's a military operation. So if they want to see something that might contradict that narrative, they might just have to go on the dark web to circumvent the internet censorship. And that's huge. And I'm a very, very big proponent of freedom of the internet, in the sense where I don't think that the government should tell you you can't go to some specific site merely because they don't like what's being said on it. The foundation of freedom of press, freedom of speech. Maybe I'm more of an American in that regard, but in terms of global politics, yeah, that's a huge, huge thing. When you can control what people are viewing online, you can control them, right? You can control the narrative that they're receiving. You can control the news. So the dark web at its core, that is really what I feel is the foundation, is that freedom of the internet. But of course, where there's smoke, there's going to be fire. When you have this internet that doesn't have any type of regulation, no type of censorship, no type of oversight, of course you're going to have the criminal element that makes its way in there. And that is why when we think of the dark web, specifically from a profession like law enforcement, where we're used to dealing with stuff like that, we get the connotation that if somebody's using the dark web, they're up to no good. And I can tell you that law enforcement is extremely, extremely behind the curve when it comes to this. And from the top level of law enforcement in our country, on the federal level, all the way down to the most smallest local police department you could think of, there is a unilateral disconnect when it comes to this stuff. And because of that, we're seeing so much right now, especially when it comes to overdoses in our country, that have a nexus to the dark web, and they're not being investigated right. They're not even being handled the right way. And that's why I founded the Ubivis Project. When I was with the DEA, I saw the extreme disconnect that there was between the state, the local, the tribal partners, and then the federal partners. There's this huge disconnect because in reality, who's handling the most cases that have a dark web nexus? The state and the local. It's not the feds. The feds are getting intelligence either from tips that are submitted, or they're getting intelligence from something that was derived from another federal case. But the reality is the boots on the ground are the state and the local partners. And if you were to go to ask them, like, hey, what do you do with dark web cases? Like, either one, they'll say, well, nobody understands the dark web, right? I'll always get that. Nobody understands that. No one understands the dark web. It's a bunch of hackers in Latvia and lead bunkers, and they're doing it there. Or you get like, well, I don't know what to do with it, and I have this historical like disconnect with the feds, like especially from the state, the local level. They view like maybe the feds are kind of like, I always use this analogy, Agents Johnson and Johnson from Die Hard, right? Here they come in, they're taking it over, and it all goes worse from there. And that's not the perception that should be commonplace. That's not the way it should work. And there are just so many cases that we have currently that were started from a state level, from a local level, that built its way all the way to the federal level to be indicted in the whatever district of the United States that they get indicted from the United States Attorney's Office. And the Ubivis Project was founded as almost this kind of IC3 per se for dark web vendors. And I just don't think people have as much of an understanding of the problem as they should. Because in order to fix a problem, right, if you want to say all the overdoses in our country are a problem, how do we fix the problem? We have to look at it from, well, what's causing the problem? And of course, you have your political pundits that will say it's whatever policies in place. They'll blame the border. They'll blame something else like that. Well, meanwhile, the death toll rises. And it's because, in my opinion, we're not focusing enough on the dark web. Right now, there are kids 14, 15 years old that are ordering all types of stuff off the dark web that are getting delivered to their home every day, right under their parents' nose. They think it's something ordered from Amazon. They think it's something ordered from eBay. Like they think it's regular e-commerce. In fact, some homes get so many packages a day, these kids might have it addressed to their parents and the parents don't even care. Like the kids just opened it. Oh, hey, I ordered something off of the Amazon store and shipped to you, and they bring it up to the room and open it and it's opioids. So that's really where I saw the most usefulness could be for a site like the Ubivis Project, ubivisproject.org, when I made it even more simple, stopdarkwebdrugs.com. And since I've gone live, I haven't had a lot of submissions, unfortunately, mainly because it's about spreading the word per se, the usefulness of my site. But I'll be the first person to tell you, I've gotten actually pushback from law enforcement entities that I thought would be welcoming, that thought they would want me there talking about the dark web, to hear what I have to say. And unfortunately, I've just gotten pushback from it where they say, oh, they think I somehow make money from this site. I'm like, do you want to see my statements from my bank? Like, I haven't made a penny from this site, but I have been able to get 3 cases working from submissions. So the value is there. And from a harm reduction standpoint, like you're a parent, let's say you're a parent in a very affluent town and you're very worried about calling the police that you just caught your kid who's going to have a scholarship to some Ivy League school. You just caught your kid ordering drugs in the mail, and they tell you they ordered it off the dark web. Here's the person I ordered it from. Their name is XYZ, right? Are they going to call the cops? Are they going to be like, hey, I'm giving you a call in regards to my son? One, they don't want to embarrass themselves. They don't want to embarrass their kid. They don't want to create this, gossip in the town at the local Starbucks where they'll be chatting about the kid and how bad of a parent they are. So now you have stopdarkwebdrugs.com where you could anonymously submit the tip. I don't have the ability to retain IP addresses, so you could submit it as anonymously as you want to be. All I really need is that vendor name, and I will go to work. And it really just comes back to me. It comes back to me finding these people. It comes back to me doing my own R&D and trying to, figure out what markets they're on, what are they selling, and then I put it in a nice little package and I send it off to my list of connections that I've made with investigators on the federal level. Put the people in touch. If it's an anonymous complaint, obviously you can't put them in touch. But if it's a submission from law enforcement, put them in touch and let's start working it, right? It's no different than cybercrime when you have this like victim roulette. Like, well, technically is the victim here, especially when you have cases involving cryptocurrencies. You could have massive scams and it's like, who has venue? Who really has venue? Well, was the victim in the United States? And if the victim was in the United States, where were they? Do we have to find that victim in wherever state they're in and forward it to that? Like you have this when you look at it from a bird's eye view, it's red tape that we put up ourselves to stop this to stop these investigations from being fluid, to stop these investigations from actually coming to fruition. And it is frustrating, and I hope anyone who hears this understands the frustration and understands that things really do need to change, and they need to change quick.
Kevin, do you think that a lot of the like I think you sort of alluded to it, the baseline level reason why everyone sort of just takes a step or two back, like, ooh, I don't understand it. Is it because they're afraid of it? Is it because they don't want to take the time to learn it? What's the real underlying fear of even getting in and getting comfortable with it and learning about it and understanding that it is not all bad and that there are other use? Where is the pushback really come from on a base level, do you think?
I honestly believe it is from that lack of knowledge. I think it's from them not really understanding it, them viewing it as some sort of computer skill set or something like that. And it's a shame, because these criminal actors, right, the people that are actually thriving and turning a profit on the dark web, they're not hackers, right? They're not people that have a good computer skill set. I guarantee you most of them don't even know how to write script, don't know a thing about Linux. But somehow, whenever you mention the dark web, especially in a law enforcement forum, whenever you mention it, those guys, that's beyond me. That's some sort of computer science. And that's where the problem is. And that's not a way to diminish the capabilities of law enforcement, because once you have the training, once you actually understand what the dark web is, then you realize that this isn't too hard to investigate. When you have cases that people don't even think have a nexus to the dark web, like fraudulent currency, fake cash being used in some way at a local store, people are like, oh, well, they don't think that the number one selling thing currently on the dark web on these different marketplaces is fake currency. The Darknet One just put out an article about it, how there was an analysis done about what the best selling stuff on these markets are now is everyone's going after fake currency. So there's just so many things that could have a nexus back to the dark web in general that people don't understand are right under their nose. And even if they did find it, like if they were to say, oh, the guy has the Tor browser on his phone, like most people don't realize that the Tor browser is 100% compatible with Android phones. It's the same browser you use on your computer than you use on the Android phone. If they were to see it on the phone and the guy was explaining, yeah, I go in the Tor browser here and I go to this onion domain and this is where I buy it and I buy it with cryptocurrency, they would think like, dude, you're a hacker, man. You know what you're wow. Right. Like, but the tutorials that are out there on YouTube, right, it just shows you how to do it, and they show it how to do it so relatively easy. And the number one thing, like if you want to know that there's some sort of cybercrime element afoot from a law enforcement aspect in your jurisdictions, just go to Coin ATM Radar and see what local shops have Bitcoin ATMs and cryptocurrency ATMs in them. There's no legitimate reason to use those. You don't need to buy Bitcoin at a gas station, but who's using them? 9 out of 10 times it's going to be someone who's being victimized, right? Oh, I have to pay my gas bill, my electric bill. They called me and said if I don't pay right now in Bitcoin, they're going to shut it off. It's going to be them, or it's going to be someone who wants to fill their wallet on a darknet market or something like that and not have to touch a compliant KYC, AML compliant exchange like Coinbase or Binance. So you have this element that's right there.
I think something that a lot of people, and even myself included, and then this is my question I'll ask, and then I'll let you and Justin kind of go deeper on these topics. But what is the easiest, simplest, basic description that any human being can understand of what is the dark web? I think there's probably a lot of forensic people that listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
That aren't like you. They're like, well, I'm not a specialist in this area. And so like, I sort of, put my blinders on when people start talking about it. And I really just don't know about it. And I actually don't understand what is the technology. How is it different from a regular browser that we use on our computer, like Chrome, right? Yeah. Like, what is it?
So it's not any different. It really is about the way your traffic is routed and how the sites are hosted. For example, people who might come from a military background, they understand that there's different networks that have higher classification than the other, and you can't access one unless you're on that actual network. The standard darknets use the same internet that we're recording this podcast on right now. without the internet connection that we have, you want to be able to get to that network. The reality is these sites are just hosted in a different way, and you need that specific browser to access those sites. So, for example, I think a few years ago, there were certain sites that were prohibiting you from using Mozilla Firefox because they had an issue with the CEO or something like that. So, if you had Firefox and you went to the site, it said you can't come in. Whenever we go to a website, obviously there's a lot of information that is given to the site about us. What system architecture are we using? Are we mobile? Are we on a Windows? Are we in Mac OS? What browser are we using? Are we using Firefox? Are we using Chrome? Are we using Edge? What's our IP address? So they can get that information to maybe have the ads from Google or something show us something that's local to us, or maybe something from our previous browsing sessions. The darknets work kind of the same way, except it's stripped down where, it's supposedly from a standpoint of the Tor network, it can see you coming in, but it really can't see who you are. And the way that the sites are hosted, they're onion sites, there's different mirrors. There's now virtual private server hosting that is specific for hosting on darknets. Like they advertise, this is us, and we are, once you build your site, we'll work with you to get your .onion domain up, or we'll work with you to get your .i2p domain up. So it really comes down to how these sites are hosted on the networks. You don't need an actual you don't need the Tor browser anymore to go on the Tor network. There's virtual private networks out there that actually offer what's called over onion routing. So as soon as you click that, your traffic is going to go into the onion router network, and then you could go on any site that you want using Chrome, using Firefox. So now with I2P used to be built into the old Internet Explorer. Now it's I2P Plus. You can use whatever browser you want. So it's really about the data being hosted on these specific darknets and what you're using to access that data. That's the most layman's terms I could think of without sounding more complicated. It's not a different internet. It's not anything like that. And that's what people need to understand. When you see the iceberg representation, right, you always see the clear net, and then you see the deep web. Then at the bottom is the dark web, and then all the way at the bottom is the elusive Mariana's web. If you've been on the dark web for a while, it's kind of like a running joke. Like the deepest, darkest part of the dark web is Mariana's web. Like the darkest part of the ocean is Mariana's Trench. So it's really no different when you start to actually go on these dark nets. And that's one of the things too that I get aggravated about, is when you have these people that are so, oh, don't go on the dark web unless you're in a virtual machine and running a VPN and you're in an airtight chamber, and it's got to be, they build up so much because they're like, you're going to blow up your computer if you go on the dark web. You're not going to blow up your computer if you go on the dark web. You're not going to expose your network to hackers if you go on the dark web. If you start to do certain things that you wouldn't normally do, if you're starting to download random programs, if you're starting to do certain things that you're not comfortable doing on the regular internet, don't do them on the dark web either, because the people sell malware on the dark web, so you're not going to want to download anything that someone's going to give you, right? It's just, I think if you can understand the internet as it is, if you are not afraid to go on the internet, you should not be afraid to go on the dark web. I'm such a big proponent of, actually cutting your teeth by going on these dark nets and understanding how they work. Just telling people that there are different dark nets, that's sometimes a shock. They're like, well, what do you mean? The Tor browser isn't the only dark web? Like that's not it. And just telling them that, that's kind of the first step to there's I2P, there's ZeroNet, there's LowKeyNet, there's FreeNet, there's IPFS, there's all these dark nets that are out there. And a lot of content is on them, and a lot of things that you might be interested in terms of investigations are on them. So that's what I would say. In the most non-short but short answer, that's really how you do it. That's how you break the stigma, is to understand the dark web in and of itself is no different than the internet we're on right now.
You were talking about, don't be afraid of being on the regular internet, the dark web, And one of the sayings that came to my mind, and it's I I don't know how sensitive people are, but the rule of don't click shit, don't get shit. Um,
Mm,
you know,
same exact thing. Same exact thing. I love when people think if you go on the dark web, you're automatically going to accidentally come across a site that a black van's going to pull up in front of your house and
That is what
abduct
I
you,
think.
put the bag over
That
your head.
I feel like as
Yeah,
soon
or
as I log into that browser, literally the law enforcement is going to drive in my driveway and haul me off. Like, but that is the public perception
yeah,
because none of us understand what it is. And we think that, at any moment they like, boop, I know that Lynn at her address just logged on. Let's go get her. Let's go pick her up. Like, we don't understand what it
yeah.
is. So thank you for your explanation of, it's the same internet. It's just a different browser, right? It's not really actually that much different than what we all are used to. We're just used to these browser, overlays that make everything perfect and pretty for us as consumers, right? It's just
hmm
it's just the same but different.
And it's funny too because the reality of your fingerprinting, right, of somebody knowing who you are, there's more exposure on the regular internet. That's
Correct.
how, that's how businesses that are quote unquote free make their money is specific targeting to you, to making, finding your advertiser profile and seeing, it's why if you go look at suits on Brooks Brothers for a wedding, all of a sudden you're on another site and boom, that same thing you were looking at is right there. So in a fundamental sense, when people use the dark web, their anonymity is really maintained more. Most of the people who wind up getting unmasked from dark web is just regular open source, poor operational security on their behalf. They say that it was the Yahoo email that was Ross Ulbrich's downfall as the admin of the darknet market Silk Road. So I also hate bringing that up because there's so many people that are quote unquote experts that teach to law enforcement now, where all they talk about is the Silk Road. And the dark web has changed significantly since 2012, 2013, 2000, even 14. The way that case was broken, a lot of those investigative techniques outside of the open source finding the post that he did, the investigative techniques of mirroring the server that they did in Iceland, and or just constantly reloading the page, running Wireshark and to see the IP, constantly reloading the page to find where that server is. You can't really do that anymore. Tor is built to protect the end user as much as the sites that are hosted. So again, while that was the good guys going after the bad guys, you have to think of the people in the countries where it's the bad guys that don't want the good guys going on the internet. So, if all it took was a Wireshark PCAP capture to constantly be reloading the site, um, the Tor browser, the Tor, the Tor network browser network, the admins, they did a good job of enhancing the security. And that's what I will tell anybody right now. You are more secure using the Tor browser than probably using your regular browser. They build so much security into the Tor browser itself. Like if you're going on the dark web and you're using the Tor browser to browse the Tor network, you are pretty safe. Like you said, don't click shit, don't get shit. If you're going on there just for whatever research you might be doing for yourself, or if you're going on there in a some type of capacity to do some investigations, you're pretty secure with the Tor browser. They do a lot to protect you. That's why they're constantly updating. If you don't go on the Tor browser like every week, you're going to have updates. So it's like you got to understand that they're doing that to protect everybody on the Tor network. That's why I donate to them anonymously every year. I donate to the Tor project because I believe in it. I believe that it's a shame, but I do believe that countries where they oppress their citizens and throttle what they view online, they shouldn't have to deal with
absolutely.
that. So
I think one of the things that your Ubivis project helps with as well as we target drug overdoses, which is kind of the worst kind of pinnacle in this drug kind of thing because it's hitting people that aren't your technical criminals or whatever. They've got a drug habit. Doesn't mean they deserve to die for it. But there's so much more wrapped up in that, such as credit card fraud, crypto fraud that we talked about. And it's interesting because maybe to your point, and you can speak on this because you wrote an article on it that I read. But one of the problems maybe with the traction is things like credit card fraud. I feel like no one cares about, even the consumer. My card. We were talking. My card got hit maybe a month ago with some random charge. I called the bank. They're just like, that done. Card's on its way. Like no, no even questions. But that whole thing, to your point, YouTube. I don't need to be a hacker in a dark basement to commit credit card fraud, and it's all tied to this stuff.
100%. If you were to ask me what the perfect crime is, perfect crime one that nobody cares about. So even if you did do it and maybe you got caught or something happened, there's going to be no repercussions to it. And two, a crime where people who would be investigating probably don't even understand how you did it. And right now, credit card fraud is just so rampant. There's so many, like if you just go on Telegram and you could see the channels that are out there, they post up every day what they're doing. They post up their credit card statement balances. They post up the new Balenciaga sweater that they bought with the stolen credit card. They do all this stuff, and it's all out there right in the open. And they're not hiding who they are doing it either. And to think that, there's this rampant market of credit card fraud and the cycle of carding where people turn very, very big profits, and all they do is buy stolen credit cards, convert them to gift cards, and then resell the gift cards. Or they buy high-end merchandise and they resell the merchandise on legitimate mediums, but because it's stolen, and they sell it for a lot less, so people will buy it. I mean, one of the things that I always bring up is Montclair jackets. Those are very, very expensive jackets. Can you give me a legitimate reason why somebody would be selling a $4,500 jacket for $2,500 and it still has its tags on it? It's verified as real. How is that possible? Now, you could be like, well, maybe they got it as a Christmas gift, right? Maybe they got it as a Christmas gift and it didn't fit them and they want to sell it. Okay, that's a rare instance, right? It's possible. But then how are they doing it with a whole bunch of merchandise? And these are on legitimate sites. These are on sites like The Real Real. These are on sites like Grailed. These are on sites where they are selling it with tags still on it. And it's like you really start to look that how did this all happen? Well, if you go back to Telegram, what do you think they're buying? They're buying the new Yeezy sneakers. They're buying this stuff that's very, very expensive, and they just turn a profit of it really quick. And that is the easiest way to make money with credit card fraud. People think with credit card fraud that, I'm going to have this stolen credit card with a high balance and I'm just going to go and I'm going to start buying stuff with it. You could find out who I am relatively quickly. It wouldn't be that hard. If you really looked at it, like if I was going into end point of sale transactions with it, you could probably find out who I was within a matter of days, really. But I'm smarter than that. I'm going to use it online. I'm going to do something with it, have it shipped to me. And to the credit of a lot of these payment processing services, the AI and stuff that they have in place now, they detect anomalous things with the charging very quickly. And one of the quickest ways is the IP address not matching up to the billing. So, for example, if my billing zip is 12345, and somehow my IP is coming back out of Belize, or my IP is coming back out of some country where I shouldn't be, and I'm ordering it, boom, that's gonna enhance the scrutiny of that charge right in and of itself. That charge is probably not even going to go through. So you have these actors also that, like King Hustle on YouTube, who explains, well, you got to use a VPN, you got to use socks, and you got to match up where, like, he gives it to the person on the other end, explaining how to do it better, so you can circumvent the scrutiny of that charge. And even with these now payment processing services that incorporate cryptocurrencies into their service, like Cash App, Venmo, you're opening the door to a very easy medium of credit card fraud, where I go and I buy cryptocurrency with a stolen credit card. Once that transaction posts, I immediately transfer that cryptocurrency to the wallet that I'm in control of, and then I could cash it out very quickly. And by the time the credit card company catches the charge, I've already cashed out. Very easy to do. And for law enforcement, we always think of credit card fraud again with the guy in Estonia, right? We think of him as these hackers, and the reality is there's such a huge nexus to street level crimes, street gangs, things like that that involve credit card fraud, that involve PII, stolen PII being sold and them using it to create lines of credit, to do things like that. And we are just so far removed from the concept of let's go after these guys. Like let's actually lay the hammer on them. I mean, yeah, the kingpin might be in Ukraine, the kingpin might be in Romania, but the guys that are doing the on the ground purchases, the guys that are receiving the stolen merchandise or cashing out the gift cards, they're right here. So it's really important to understand that, you should be looking harder at this. Maybe you should be on these Telegram channels seeing who's posting every day. Maybe you should see if do some of those receipts have a zip code that's close to you, right? Is again, it's not too hard to get into this from a criminal standpoint, and it's not too hard to investigate it from an investigator standpoint. And I think the stigma that we have in place where somehow it's all going to wind up overseas, right? We're here in the United States. Those actors are in Nigeria, right? We're never going to catch them. It's like, well, yeah, you can. Like, that's what Interpol's for. That's why there's Europol for stuff there too. That's why we have these forged partnerships. That's why we have mutual legal assistance treaties. That's why we have these things in place. So it's easy for us in law enforcement to just say, yeah, no, we're not even going to take that report, right? We're not going to do, what real police work is, investigating things of that nature. It's easy for us to just close the door, and that's a shame too. And it's all, in my opinion, a symptom of a much larger problem of not really understanding how prevalent cybercrime is as a whole. There's no borders to cybercrime, and there's no easier way to make money than cybercrime.
Do you think that, I mean, what's the solution? Ultimately, is it that you need dedicated cybercrime people in every agency and every team and every state and every town and is it a matter of just getting people who aren't afraid of this entire concept?
I think it's a combination of both. I know the Secret Service does a phenomenal job with the National Computer Forensics Institute. They send guys there for free to get them on the investigative task forces to do things like that. But again, those classes have a seats 50 max maybe, and you have so many guys that want to get in. And then you have, unfortunately, these predatory companies that will sell themselves to training for law enforcement, who are often intertwined with grant money and things of that nature to put on law enforcement for free. And you're sitting in the class and they're going to talk to you for 2 days about the Silk Road and how that was done. You might as well be going for a history lesson. And it frustrates me because that's part of the problem, is that you have, again, maybe they were very, very good investigators back in the day, but they don't stay current with it. Their slides haven't been updated in 3 years, and they're going to sit there because the training's put on for free, and they're going to put on this antiquated, pretty much this history lesson about this was cybercrime back then. And you're not really learning anything. Like, you might get some fundamentals, but you have to have people that are current on it. Nothing frustrates me more than when I hear an expert or someone who promotes themselves as an expert talk about the dark web, and I go, hey, have you seen this site on LokiNet? And they go, what's LokiNet? How are you an expert on the dark web and you don't even know what dark nets are? It's the same thing where you have these people who say that they're investigators of the dark web currently with different law enforcement entities across this country, and like, oh yeah, I haven't been on the dark web in like 5 months. What's going on there? It's like, then don't sell yourself as it. You got
Well,
to,
like you said, like they update the browser like every week. I
yeah,
mean, so I mean,
you
you
got,
can't just you can't not pick it up for 5 months. There's so much that's changed.
and
Even just
it's the same with cryptocurrency too, because obviously we have to acknowledge cryptocurrency is the part of the ecosystem that drives these illicit markets. It's not a slam on cryptocurrency. It's not, because I'm a very big proponent of cryptocurrency myself, but it is part of that ecosystem. In my opinion, Bitcoin wouldn't have gotten where it was today had it not been for those transactions that were taking place on those darknet markets back then. So you have people who, again, think that they understand cryptocurrencies, but they don't stay up to date with it. Like now, one of the biggest things, especially with crypto crimes, are these decentralized exchanges, the tokens, the swapping, things of that nature. And investigators have to stay abreast to it because you have to understand how these criminals are facilitating these crimes. And if you're not with your nose on the grindstone, if you don't have your ear to the ground with this, you're going to fall behind really quick. And I sound like a broken record, but you got to keep yourself on you got to keep yourself on the grind with it. You got to keep yourself abreast. You got to read the periodicals that come out with the dark web. You got to read it. You got to see what their thinking law enforcement's capabilities are, and you got to be on the forums. You got to be in the Telegram groups. You have to be in there, and you have to do it that way, in my opinion.
It's unfortunately we're not seeing the trend because it's not a new issue, as you've mentioned. But as I was looking around, like, what was it? About 4 years ago, the Rutgers football team had a bunch of players that got hooked up for carding, and they're using their bookstore, their university bookstore, to exchange the stolen stuff into gift cards to move it out. And there were a bunch of football players doing it. So yeah, it's not shady people in dark corners. It's, university students playing football at a high level at their university bookstore. And,
yeah, and that is such a easy carding case example. That's very easy to look at to say, hey, who's doing this, right? Give me the actor. Those guys aren't in hoods. Those guys weren't computer savvy. They just knew what to do because they watched some tutorial. They read something on some forum about how to do it, and they got away with it once, and they turned it into an enterprise really quick.
Yeah,
there's no science behind it other than the drive to make money.
One of the things that you mentioned that I thought was interesting, and we talked about, you mentioned actually in a previous conversation we had, that I wonder is really adding to the stigma, is we still have this idea that it has to be this physical harm done to someone. That's a crime. If I see a drug dealer on the corner selling something, I can, it's tangible, so that it's a crime. But once it goes into this virtual, unless it's almost like CSAM, virtual crime isn't a crime.
Yeah.
In this kind of weird perception.
So I will be the first person to tell you, private sector aligning with the public sector have done a phenomenal job with combating CSAM, child pornography online. You have the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. You have Thorn, Torch, or all this stuff. This collaborations of people that are going after not only the child sexual abuse material, but they're going after the human trafficking, the smuggling, things of that nature. And that is a phenomenal job. And really now, when you look at the prevalency of child pornography, the dark web in general, especially the darknet markets, they want nothing to do with it. They say, hey, listen, there's no quicker way to get us on the radar of law enforcement than to offer child pornography for sale. That was probably the archetype case of that. I think would be the Freedom Hosting case, where the actor who was sentenced within the past 2 years out of Ireland, they were able to hit him with charges of conspiracy to distribute advertised child pornography because he allowed that stuff to be hosted with his server. So technically, because he was making money from the sites being hosted on his service, he was de facto wrapped into that. And you don't want those charges, right? Even you do not want those charges. So from a collaborative effort of not only law enforcement, the private sector, but also the dark web Robin Hoods policing themselves. They have pushed child pornography into such a small corner. And really, where it's prevalent now is the free net. Where it's prevalent is IPFS. But on your standard Onion sites, your standard I2P sites, it's kind of been pushed away. Now there's kind of this convergence of the new logic of instead of calling people pedophiles, you call them MAPs, minor attracted persons. And you have like now these forums that are being built to say, hey, we're MAP support forums for other minor attracted persons to talk to each other. So you kind of see like this, it's not as out there as it once was if you were to be going after it as an investigator. And that's what we need for dark web drugs. That's what we really need in terms of if we had this unilateral effort from the private sector and the public sector to go after these guys, there wouldn't be as much prevalency for dark web drugs as there is today. The admin of Alphabet, he goes by the name of DeSnake, he recently touted himself saying he does his own harm reduction, where he has secret shoppers on his Alphabet I2P market to go after guys that are vending opioids and to see if there's fentanyl in them. How they're doing this, I don't know. Are they ordering the drugs and then testing them on themselves? I don't know how this actual harm reduction campaign that he was running was conducted. But that's something he touts himself. He touts himself as this altruistic dark web admin guy, and part of his rules are no fentanyl. You're not allowed to sell fentanyl. I say, well, guess what? People are ODing and dying from drugs they're buying on Alphabet just as much as they're ODing and dying from drugs they buy on whatever other darknet market. But there is this, I feel that there is this way for us, and when I say us, I say myself and law enforcement, private sector like yourself. There's a way for there to be this unilateral effort to help. Okay, we did it with child pornography. We really pushed it back. There's so many ways that we can detect it now. There's so many, things in place that help not make it as available as it once was. Let's do that with dark web drugs. Let's push these guys into a corner. And I think that there has been a great effort, specifically by the Follow Money, Fight Slavery.org, the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative. They run their own platform where it's historical index dark web data. So it's good that for any type of investigator to see stuff that has been from the dark web dating back to like 2012, maybe there's a way to correlate something to somebody who's still in operation today. But also, let there be like ICAC type task forces like they have for this internet crime against children stuff, but have it for dark web stuff. Because like we said earlier, or like you and I said in our previous conversation, there's kind of this breakdown where if you say, hey, it's something involving the dark web, you're like, oh, that's a tech problem. That's for the computer guys. That's not for us. We're the narco squad, right? We're the drug squad. It's like, and then transversely, you have something where you do have these tech guys, right? And it's like, hey, it has something to do with drugs on the dark web. Oh, no, send that to the drug squad. We only deal with child sexual abuse material. We deal with malware. We deal with that. We don't deal with that stuff. So it's like it's like everyone's making a myriad of excuses to not actually do this the right way. And it is frustrating. It really is frustrating.
It's gonna be a mental change, but I like the comparison to like an ICAC type organization, because the advantage of ICAC, of course, is that you have federal agents in ICAC all the way down to, you could have a one cop shop where that one cop is also an affiliate of ICAC. So you get this communication, you get this distribution of resources. And we already have a law enforcement system today, from the DEA at the top all the way to drug task force units and stuff down at the local PD level. It just feels like it's an oversimplification to say one step, but it's like we need a framework, a web between those to allow information, funds, and and collaboration to flow easier between those two, not two, but those multiple levels from top to bottom.
So what's funny, and especially like you say, the DEA, my biggest critique about the Drug Enforcement Administration is how they kind of put dark web cases in its own little corner. For some odd reason, they always embed like dark web cases within the tactical diversion squad and every single unit across the country. It's like that's buried in TDS. TDS is responsible for the doctors, licensing of pharmacies, things of that nature. And they bury the cyber type stuff in those TDS squads. And it's like, why are you doing that? Why are you automatically handicapping the investigations into this, because you're pushing it to TDS. And now with what the DEA has done, and I give Administrator Ann Milgram so much credit. She's originally from New Jersey, so I'm rooting for her from the get go. She really has this harm reduction, one pill can kill campaign. But where I could say that the emphasis is not being put is on the dark web. Like they talk about drugs being purchased on social media and Snapchat. Okay, like you can buy drugs on Uber Eats too. If you know what driver's there and you ask for, you ask for extra Parmesan or something, he's going to know what you mean. He's going to be able to do it. But it's like the dark web is still treated like this weird enigma that they just throw into its own little corner, and they think that you have to have a specific skill set to investigate it. Like, not to say you shouldn't hone your skills when you do it, but I myself, I wasn't a computer guy. I didn't have a background in computers. Music production, maybe, because I did that since I was 15 years old. That's where my skill set in terms of computers were. When I was thrown onto the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, that's when I really hit the ground running, because I saw at the time, I was like, hey, I really want to learn about this. And doors were open to me at the time, and I was able to walk through those doors. But just doing that training isn't enough. You have to stay up to speed. And when I got to the level I'm at now, when I started to teach, I'm always constantly updating my material to stay current, because if you don't do that, you're not doing anything good. And I taught down at FLETC SciCon last year, and I heard the greatest anecdote ever. Today's SME is tomorrow's historian. And it's true. If you do not stay up to date, I'm going to just be like the instructors, the experts that I hate, that get up there and they talk for stuff that's so antiquated that all you're learning about is history. You're not learning about anything that you can actively go out and do. And that's what's important. And if you were to ask me where we in law enforcement need to start, just from law enforcement, not the general public, not everything, because that comes with time. But where we in law enforcement need to start is we need to get trained on this better. We need to understand first and foremost that this is not some little small problem that we're never ever going to come across. I don't care if you live in the richest town in the world. I don't care if you live in the poorest city. It's going on there. And a testament to, like I talked about earlier, the stigmas that are maybe harbored about the feds from the locals and the locals about the feds. Had a case in a very, very affluent town involving dark web drugs, where the chief would not let us use his headquarters to conduct an interview for whatever reason. Like, he was adamantly against it. He believed that there was no problem with drugs in his town. The average baseline price of homes in this town is like right around $1 million. The high school's at 10 out of 10 in all the ratings, but somehow these kids that were 15, 16 years old were ordering drugs off the dark web and selling them in the high school. And the chief said, you cannot use my headquarters. I will not give you any resources. I'm not going to give you a marked unit. I'm not going to give you anything. Why? I have no clue. All I was a task force officer on the DEA asking to interview the person we identified as the recipient. And in that case, that kid was having drugs shipped to his house under his father's name. And when you talk to his father, he had no clue about it. So it's like, where's the breakdown? Well, one, you have the law enforcement fighting against the federal partners. Two, you have this cognitive dissonance with the parents who don't realize that their all-star kid is ordering drugs off the dark web. So What do I offer on the Ubivis project? You could be an anonymous civilian, or you could be law enforcement. So that, that's where I try to see how both bridges can be crossed at the same time. And it really does come down to understanding this is a bigger problem than it is. With overdoses specifically, the amount of overdoses that we've had in this country in the past 2 years, we're almost at, I think, a 250,000 deaths over the past 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't seen the data yet for 2022, but for 2020 and 2021, we were floating right around 100,000 a year. And out of all those cases, can you ask how many were investigated? How many of those cases were looked at from a standpoint of, where we're going to find the people that sold the drugs to this person?
No.
Not many. And maybe that's because we, especially in law enforcement, have our own views about people who suffer from substance abuse. Maybe we don't really feel that, those cases warrant an investigation, right? And the comparison that I say, and I wrote about this in American Police Beat too, as well. You have a homicide, could be the worst gang member, deserved it, person deserved it coming, and that homicide is still going to get an investigation. They're still going to collect something from the crime scene. They're going to be looking for who killed this person. Now, compare that to maybe the 18, 19, 20-year-old college kid who was struggling with addiction since high school, ODs and dies at some frat party. Are they going to be looking at it? Are they going to seize his phone, try to see who he was talking to? Are they going to, maybe interview anybody? Are they going to do X, Y, and Z? I mean, maybe with a frat party, yeah. But what if it was like alone in his dorm? They're not going to do anything. And that in and of itself is a bigger problem. Not every case is going to have a nexus to the dark web, but the only way you could find it out is if you start to look at the case, right? If you start to see, looking for things at the crime scene. Do you even view it as a crime scene? Do you view it as a medical call, right? The person's OD'd and dead, and you get there, wait for the medical examiner, and it's like, do you look at it as a crime scene? Or are you actually looking like maybe there's an open parcel that is right on his kitchen counter, and on that parcel there's some information there that you could get from the Postal Inspection Service. Hey, where was this parcel shipped from? I guarantee if you start to look at it, oh yeah, well, that's what's a Bitcoin postage parcel. That's the biggest way to ship Bitcoin postage.info. That's what they're using. They're not using some hidden service. It's something that exploits Easy Post. The amount of volume of drugs that get shipped every day via the postal service. They're not using FedEx or UPS if it's not bigger drugs. It's just little things like that. And again, we could sit around and point the finger and have talking heads on whatever political news channel you want to subscribe to that'll try to point the finger every which way that they can, blame policies, blame this, blame that. The reality is, in law enforcement, we need to do better. We need to be looking at these overdoses. We need to see, hey, do these cases have a nexus to the dark web? Even if they don't, they could still be investigated. I can tell you so many families that have lost loved ones where it either had a nexus to the dark web or it had a nexus to some sort of a street level dealing where there was no investigation into the case at all. And that's the shame. That is the real crime of it. If you were to ask me what is the real hurt of this whole thing, that's it. And we really,
is that part of the reason why you founded Ubivis Project? English.
Yeah.
Justin, edit me out because I just
Ubivis,
can't say the word project.
Project. So Ubivis, yeah, you can say stopdarkwebdrugs.com because it'll take you right to the same site. So the Ubivis project, Ubivis is Latin for everywhere, so I wanted to make it seem a little more, or everywhere project. Ooh, that in and of itself strikes fear into these dark web bad guys, right? They're everywhere. And
They're always watching.
Yeah, the octopus is always the scary creature to associate with like omnipotent knowledge. So I actually had a close fraternity brother. I'm going to try to hold in here. He passed away from dark web drugs some odd years ago, and case same exact thing, just right off, case closed. He OD'd and died. It's like, and I knew for a fact he was getting those drugs off the dark web. And then I had other cases that I dealt with the DEA where we came in later, after like a week or two, or maybe like a few weeks after this person had passed away, because we got intelligence that there were dark web parcels that were going to the house. And imagine trying to work a homicide backwards, right? We have like the show's like 48 hours where all of a sudden the clock starts. It's like then like by the end of the episode, it's like they've interviewed 25 people and they figured out who did what. But imagine like coming into that case is like 4 weeks later, like SpongeBob, like
Yeah.
4 hours later, right? Like just like person dies 4 weeks later, DEA's knock on your door. Hey, can we talk to you about, the death of your son, your loved one? They were 9 out of 10 times they're not going to open the door. They're still in the grieving phase. But if law enforcement had started the day of, then you really don't have to deal with the family per se. Then it's law enforcement to law enforcement. Maybe they have that digital evidence that was seized at the scene. Hey, we seized the iPhone, but we can't get into it. Well, there's tools that exist on that law enforcement agencies, maybe on a federal level, have access to that can help with that. But that bridge didn't get crossed because this person OD'd and died. They've released everything to the family. The family tried 20 times to get into the phone and wiped it. So now all that evidence is gone. And not only that, you're still grieving, and the DEA comes knock on your door saying, "Hey, your loved one was receiving drugs from the dark web." Slam, doors going right in your face. It's just it's so cyclical and it's so systemic that I don't think people really understand that. I really don't. I don't think people understand how my fraternity brother's case, how other cases I worked while I was at the DEA, just how prevalent it is. And that really is why I did this. That's really where my drive comes from. And even though we've only had 3 submissions that have been active, those are now cases that are being worked, and one was a fatal overdose. So on my site, we have the overdose crisis where we try to geopoint overdose death submissions. We also scrape some older data of historical vendor arrests. Just I wanted to have that representation on there, and unfortunately, it's taking a little bit longer. But to have like, look, this is everywhere. Okay, it's not just in these small little corners. It's not just like this one little novelty case that you might come across in your law enforcement career, in your 3-decade law enforcement career. You might come across a dark web case once. No, it's going on right now. Please understand it.
I had a case. This would have been 2011, so rewinding quite a while. But to your point, like thinking back on it, a man overdosed in his apartment. Of course, somebody the way that it was called in is he was a guy that vacuumed his apartment every day at 2 p.m. like clockwork. So when his neighbors didn't hear the vacuum come on at 2 p.m., they went up, knocked, nobody answered. They called the cops, and sure enough, he was in his bathroom, just curled over. He'd OD'd, and yeah, I'm just the cyber guy. In fact, at the time, I was just an intern. I don't recall any, maybe they did, but I think it was mostly just like, okay, no foul play, right? He wasn't murdered in the traditional sense, and notify the family that he's passed and close that case and move on. I know we didn't, because I was in the cyber, we didn't work his phone, or a computer or anything. I don't know if there was one in there. We didn't even really look. Just moved on. And I know the other thing
yeah, I was gonna say, for every case like that, there's a million more. It's the cases recently that came to light with fatal overdose deaths in the news, like Mac Miller. 3 got federally indicted for that. The rapper Mac Miller, Michael K. Williams, the actor, that's just playing out now. Those guys are getting sentenced. Tyler Skaggs, the pitcher from the Los Angeles Angels, that guy recently got sentenced, and that was him providing that oxy to him and other players in the ball club. For every case where there is a home run, a grand slam, 9 out of 10 times federal partners are involved. But that gives the perception that unless the feds are involved, you can't work these cases. And unfortunately, for every great success story, there's a million failures of cases just like yours. Like they didn't take his phone, they didn't take his computer, they were quick to close it out, right? Died unattended. It was an overdose death, or even then, the contingencies that we put in place, right? Well, we have to wait for the toxicology to come back. Okay, that could take a while, 3 to 4 weeks. So you're not going to investigate anything until you get the confirmation that this person died of an overdose, right? We put these things in place. We put these mechanisms in place that inhibit us in law enforcement. And it's a shame too, because maybe there could have been something that some sort of resolve from that OD case of the back in 2011. Maybe there could have been a dark web vendor arrested from the death of my fraternity brother. Maybe there could have been something more to it. And I just I feel almost like I'm a broken record, because when I speak at all these events and when I do, get up there and you wind me up and I do my little dance and run around and say, hey, stay, the dark web, this is what's going on in the dark web. And everyone goes, ooh, we didn't know about this. We didn't know about that. And then it's just like, okay, and then we go back to the way it usually was, right? and I do have some people who have constantly reached out to me from the trainings that I put on. I teach for street cop training. They're a premier law enforcement agency directed for state and local partners. And then I also teach for Noble. They're a cleared defense contractor. This is more in the FedGov DoD space. But the amount of people who reach out to me and they say like, hey, we got these cases. We just didn't know what to do with them, from a cybercrime aspect of crypto cases that are literally just sitting open for 2 years because nobody sat down and did any tracing. Or cases like, yeah, it was a weird case. The kid was, the kid OD'd and died. We did actually seize the devices, but we didn't know it. Like, they've sat there in perpetuity. It's just like I wish that there was a bigger platform. And I think Senators Klobuchar and Senator Capito did a great thing back in November. They issued an open letter to the heads of the heads of the DOJ, Department of Homeland Security, and the DEA, basically asking, what are we doing about fentanyl on the dark web? Like, they actually put 2 and 2 together. It's like fentanyl on the dark web. What is being done? And I emailed their chiefs of staff and I said, look, this is the one dude in the whole entire world who will sit here and talk to you till your head falls off about it is me. And I reached out to them saying, look, I'll tell you, there's not enough being done. The prioritization is not there. And when you look at how some kid or I shouldn't say even kid, like how somebody in the middle of nowhere just ODs and dies, and nobody looks at it like, well, how did he get the drugs? How did he or she get the drugs? Like, is there some sort of dealer somewhere we don't know about? It's like, no, they ordered it off the dark web. It got shipped to them like anything else. And people do have this like weird, comfortable nature of ordering off these dark web vendors because they have positive reviews, right? Oh, this guy is 10 out of 10. He ships really fast. He got me really good drugs. Well, what about the 30 other people who are dead now that ordered off this guy?
Not leaving reviews.
Yeah, they're dead people don't leave negative reviews. So unless you got a Ouija board, you can't ask them how this vendor was, right? So, and that's the shame. And that's what people don't realize. And it's just a myriad of frustration, but also hope in the sense where I think, through podcasts like this, I think through people looking into what I'm doing, I'm not the only one doing it, but I feel sometimes like I am. Just looking into these cases, I think that we're really going to, once we understand the problem, that's when you can fix it, right? The first step to fixing a problem is admitting there's a problem and then figuring out what that problem is. And I think right now we're not prioritizing it the right way. We're not prioritizing the dark web drugs the right way. And this is the byproduct of it. Everybody that we have that we're constantly seeing each year with the death toll rising for fentanyl and synthetic opioids and stuff like that. I just don't know how much more it will take in order for them to realize that the dark web is an integral part of that whole problem.
Is it as easy, and I don't want to say, I guess easy is probably the wrong word, but is it easier than people think? Like, bringing it, obviously, in our wheelhouse with digital forensics and software tools and FTK, like, could it be as easy as, let me get your phone, let me get your computer, person
Yes.
who orders drugs
Yes.
died,
100%.
we get their phone, we get their computer, we go through all of, all a typical digital forensic investigation when you're looking at all the metadata and, the emails and the pictures and the networks connected to, and where, I mean, is it easy for you to see, oh, I see where you logged into the dark web and I see what you did, and now I can try to go follow that path to find the person who sold it to you? Like, is it easy enough? Do people have the skill set and they just don't know it?
Yeah, I believe it.
Okay.
The biggest skill set, the most underlooked skill set, is the ability to talk to people. Not every officer and person in law enforcement know how to talk to people, so I'll say that flat off the bat.
A lot of people in any place, in
Yeah.
any industry in the world, don't know how to talk to people.
But
so there you go.
from a standpoint of, if I were a dark web purchaser and I ordered something that was conveyed to be pure pharmaceutical Adderall, and I took that Adderall and had fentanyl in it, and I wake up with a Narcan in my nose, I'm going to be mad, right? I'm going to be mad. I'm going to go on that dark web and I'm going to give that vendor a negative review. But what if law enforcement came to me? They're like, listen, especially in states like New Jersey, where we have this Overdose Immunity Protection Act, where we have these laws in place where if you're a victim of an overdose, they can't spin around and charge you for taking the drugs, right? What if we went back there and we just asked them, like, hey, who'd you order this off of? Like, do you want to make a real difference? Like, think about the people who died from it. You were saved. You got Narcan. You were saved. Think about the people who didn't have that opportunity. Let's actually, let's do something about it. Who's the guy you ordered off of? Okay, so it's this vendor, Joe Schmo, whatever. That might be the first step to actually following up with these overdoses, talking to victims of overdoses, like viewing them as victims, viewing them actually as victims, right? Not these people live by the sword, die by the sword, viewing them as victims, saying that, yeah, we can do something in law enforcement. We want to help people who really now can't speak for themselves, people who are dead. They can't come back and help you solve the case. So you got to be able to streamline it. You got to be able to work it with what you can. And people who have survived from overdoses, they might not be willing to talk at first, but just constantly, not putting pressure on them. Listen, you come here right now and you tell me everything. Not doing that. And that's sometimes a little bit of an adjustment for law enforcement. We're used to an authoritarian approach to a lot of things because we have to be that authority figure. But in this space specifically, it's more sensitive, and I'm always the person who will sit down and talk to somebody. Like, they'll pull a chunk from the Goonies with me. Tell us everything, get everything. And a lot of cases that I worked that were dark web cases or regular cybercrime cases, just that approach of, this guy was involved, he wasn't as high as he thought he was, X, Y, and Z. Just that approach has yielded so much great information that was able to be worked later down the line. So like you say, forensic toolkit, FTK, things of that nature for what could be found. 100%, it's all there. It's all on the computer. Zoolander, the files are in the computer, right? They're there. Everybody has a phone. Like, that's the one thing. Everybody's got a phone. Like, if you're responding to an overdose scene, why are you not taking the phone, right? If this person's dead, why are you not taking that phone? Why are you not trying to figure out who sold this person drugs?
Like you said, it's browser data.
It's all
right.
And even then, serving a legal notice to the internet service provider or the cellular service provider, connecting to the dark nets, it leaves its signature in your IP history. Or even, and then you'll hear people go, okay, well, then log on to the VPN, then log on to the darknet. Well, then I could see you logging on to the VPN. So it's like they just don't understand all the breadcrumbs that are there that you could put together to establish that, yeah, this person was using the dark web. This person was using the dark web to order drugs, and this likely the drugs they ordered from the dark web is what killed them. So let's figure this all out. And that's my oversimplification of it.
Well, it's a great oversimplification, and I think it needs to happen. Training, awareness, and yeah, even the training of the tech guys and a different paradigm. Because I know, as I looked at the warrants that would come in for drug cases when I was doing examinations full time, most of it is, I just need chats and photos. Just give me the chats and the photos. I need photos of drugs and the chats with their buddies. Very rarely would the warrants include something like looking at URL history, and I think, a lot of these little things are like, it wouldn't have been hard for me to also look at web history. Now, if the warrant forbids me from looking at web history, that's a different problem, but it's not a hard process to also take a look at that, do some searches, and, putting, vendors on blast here, even though I work for one. It's not hard for us to go to someone like Kevin Hendricks or to go to the DEA and say, what dark websites do you know about now, and how do we build a filter for that, so that we're automatically detecting that and flagging that in our tool, so that you don't, because a lot of officers might listen to this podcast and think, well, that's a lot of extra work. That's always the thing. Like, well, yeah, but where am I going to find the time? Well, I think that's where
the scariest 4-letter word in police work,
I know,
right? The scariest.
But
word.
I think vendors. I just dropped my pen. I think vendors can step up, especially in the realm of forensics, and that's a lot of what vendors try to do, is make that job. I need to present that information to you, Kevin. Here's the dark web links. All right, well, I'm going to go through and be like, what do I know? What do I don't know? And build that timeline. So I think this is great. And I think everybody from in the investigative infrastructure, top to bottom, vendors, civilians, all have something that we can take away and improve on in this aspect of dark web drug stuff. But you know what? But we've been on for an hour and a half. So Kevin, is there anything you want to close with, and we can let you get back to your day? And we're just very grateful you appeared.
No, thank you so much. If anybody is interested in the site, or what I'm doing, ubivisproject.org, I'm sure the link, or you'll share it in the but ubivisproject.org and stopdarkwebdrugs.com, and whatever else you think I could do for Xtero, just let me know. I'm or FTK, however, I'm willing and able. I'm always keen to stand up and talk about this any chance I get, to raise awareness to it, because it is probably one of the largest components to the overdose deaths that we're having in this country currently. And unfortunately, until we accept that, until we break the stigmas that we have in both the private sector and the public sector about the dark web, there's not ever going to be any furtherance for it. There's not ever going to be any type of change. And if it's not, fentanyl doing something some way, there'll be some other synthetic opioid. And I have the data on my site, the most recent data from 2021 that was available, so people can look at it to realize that, this is huge. This is really something. And I think the reason we don't talk about it enough is because we don't understand it. And if you want to understand it, come talk to me. I'll make you understand
Nice.
it really quick. No, if you don't understand it, yeah, right. That's a good soundbite. Come talk to me. I'll make you understand.
Make you understand.
Yeah, I'll beat it into you.
You're not leaving until you understand.
Yeah, no, I'll show you just how easy it is to get into this. Just how easy it is to buy drugs on the dark web, and just how many people.
I would love to see you guys. This is, I signed Justin up for things, and he's like, "What are you? Don't sign me up for that." I would love it if you guys could figure out how to do a webinar or a video, even if it's pre-recorded or live. Like, hey, here's a data set. Here's what you should look for, right? Here's a data set from a mobile phone or from a computer. This is what it would look like if you were searching for some sort of dark web history, right? Like that. I think people don't even know they don't even physically know what it looks like on the screen.
So
right?
I actually have
That could be
been
interesting.
I have been working with a programmer to have a tool to distribute to law enforcement for free, called Inspector, but obviously Tor incorporated into it.
Yep.
But what the tool does is it ingests a CSV or XS file, and it looks for the specific string of characters that are associated with Tor sessions. So if you have a phone GPRS mobile IP session, there are specific instances where you can see it connecting to the Tor network. It combs through that and finds those specific instances, and then it gives you a spread, it gives you a doc, whether a PDF or DOCX file, that shows you at the exact UTC time when they were connected to the Tor network. Now you can't see where they were going. You cannot see anything beyond the fact that they were connected to the Tor network. But let's say
that's a breadcrumb.
Yeah, and let's say you were looking at something specific involving a drug overdose or something of that nature. You get 30 days GPRS history. This person OD'd or died on a specific day. So usual shipment is 3 days, right? So if you see all this Tor stuff conducive with that, more than likely this person was probably ordering drugs off of Tor. So that's just one of the darknets. But it's the most popular. It's the one where all the darknet markets are hosted that we associate with the dark web. So yeah, that would be something that you can realize that, hey, they were using Tor, or they were using a service that has access to the Tor network, because now there's VPNs, there's other services out there that utilize the Tor relay infrastructure. So they're doing something with their phone, even if you can't get into the phone. Some of the best cases I ever worked, we never got into the phone. We did everything from the back end. We did everything from where they were going with viewing their GPRS sessions, or we were doing analytics of who they were in contact with on WhatsApp, things of that nature. It's all there, and I think that's also something we in law enforcement, if you can't get into the phone, you're done. You can't get into the phone, you're done. That's it. Phone, you're locked out. Nothing. Well, let's work a little bit, right? Let's do that 4-letter word that we're all scared of, and that's why tools like FTK, Xtero, they're just so phenomenal. And whatever you want me to do, I can do it. You wind me up, I'll go until you tell me to stop.
So you're saying there's going to be a sequel. I like it. Part 2 of this podcast / webinar / training / all of it. It's happening.
The dark web 2,
Web 2,
the return.
The sequel.
That's right.
Hey, Kevin, thanks again so much for jumping on with us and chatting. And, hopefully we can promote more awareness of this and start to help facilitate some change. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, no, thank you. You got me away from my kids for about an hour and a half. Now I hear them.
People helping people.
Yeah, they're just chomping for me right now. So once.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Thank you guys so much.
We'll talk to you
Can't
soon.
wait to hear the final product.
Kevin.
See ya. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.